The dust hung thick in the Arizona afternoon air as Isaac Zimmerman rode into Hallbrook, his bay mare Copper weary from the long trail from Prescott. He had never seen a woman cry quite like that before, standing in the middle of the bustling market square with her shoulders shaking and tears streaming down her face, while people just walked past her like she was invisible. Something about the sight made his chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with the oppressive July heat of 1882. Grace Nolan stood among the crates of vegetables and barrels of flour, clutching an empty basket and a few crumpled coins in her palm. She had counted them 3 times already, hoping somehow the amount would change, but mathematics were stubborn things. $2.30 would not feed 3 children for a week, no matter how many times she recounted. Her husband Thomas had been dead for 6 months now, trampled by spooked cattle during a storm, and the ranch they had worked so hard to build was crumbling around her like a sandcastle at high tide. The bank had already sent 2 letters about the mortgage, and she had sold everything she could bear to part with just to keep food on the table. Isaac dismounted and tied Copper to the hitching post outside the general store, his spurs jingling softly as he walked. He was a tall man of 28, weathered by years of driving cattle across the territories, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of good whiskey. He had planned to stock up on supplies and head back out to the ranch where he worked as foreman, but those plans evaporated the moment he saw her face. She looked young, maybe 24 or 25, with auburn hair escaping from a bun that had probably been neat that morning and a calico dress that had been mended more times than he could count. "Madam," he said quietly, approaching her like he would a frightened horse, "are you all right?" Grace looked up, startled, and tried to wipe her face with her sleeve. "I am fine, thank you. Just the dust in my eyes." Nobody cried like that from dust, and they both knew it. Isaac glanced down at the coins in her hand and understood immediately. He had grown up poor himself, the son of a widow who had washed clothes until her hands bled to keep him and his sisters fed. "That market can be terrible confusing," he said easily, as if they were just making conversation. "I was about to do some shopping myself, but I have always been terrible at knowing what to buy. You look like someone who knows her way around a kitchen. Would you mind helping me pick out some things? I would be happy to pay you for your time." It was a lie, and a transparent one, but it gave her a way to accept help without charity burning her pride to ashes. Grace looked at him properly for the first time, taking in the honest face and kind eyes, the worn but clean clothes, and the gentle way he held himself at a respectful distance. She should say no. She should thank him and walk away. But her children's faces floated in her mind, and she heard herself say, "I suppose I could help with that." "Much obliged," Isaac said, and something in his chest loosened when she gave him a small, watery smile. They walked through the market together, and Isaac asked questions about cuts of meat, and which vegetables kept longest and how much flour a household really needed. Grace found herself relaxing as they talked, falling into the familiar rhythm of discussing practical things. She helped him select bacon and beans, potatoes and cornmeal, dried apples and coffee and sugar. When she picked up a bag of peppermint sticks, then put it back with a wistful expression, he waited until she was examining tomatoes and added it to the growing pile. "You have quite a large household," Grace observed as the storekeeper tallied up the purchases. "I am planning ahead," Isaac said vaguely, which was not quite a lie. He was planning, just not for himself. "Say, I just realized I have no way to carry all this back. My horse is already loaded down with my bedroll and gear. You would not happen to have a wagon nearby, would you?" Grace hesitated. She did have the wagon, old and rickety as it was. "I do, but I could not possibly accept. You would be doing me a tremendous favor," Isaac interrupted gently. Otherwise, I will have to make 2 trips, and I have a long ride ahead of me. Please, consider it payment for all your help today. The storekeeper, old Mr. Patterson, watched this exchange with knowing eyes but said nothing. He had seen the Nolan woman come in every week with fewer coins each time, had watched her children get thinner. If a kind stranger wanted to help, he was not about to interfere. Grace looked at the pile of groceries, enough food to feed her family for 2 weeks at least, and felt tears threatening again. But this time they were different. That is very kind of you, Mr. Zimmerman. Isaac Zimmerman, but please just Isaac. Mr. Zimmerman, she said firmly, because propriety was one of the few things she had left. I am Grace Nolan, and I thank you. They loaded the groceries into her wagon together, and Isaac noticed how thin the horse in the traces looked, how the wagon wheel had a wobble that spoke of loose bolts. He noticed the way Grace's dress hung a bit too loose on her frame, and realized she had probably been giving most of her food to her children. The thought made him angry at a world that could be so hard on good people. Mrs. Nolan, he said as she prepared to climb up onto the wagon seat, would you mind if I followed you home? That wheel looks like it might cause trouble, and I have some tools in my pack. I could tighten it up for you. Grace knew she should refuse. She had already accepted too much from this stranger. But the wheel had been worrying her for weeks, and she could not afford to pay someone to fix it, and if it broke completely, she would have no way to get to town at all. I live about 3 miles out, she said. On the old Hastings place, if you know it. I will follow behind, Isaac said, and swung up onto Copper. The ride out to the Nolan ranch gave Isaac time to think about what he was doing. He had been on his way to the Morrison spread where he worked, where he was due back tomorrow. But something about this woman had hooked into him like a burr, and he could not just ride away. Maybe it was the way she held her spine so straight even when she was crying. Maybe it was the flash of fierce love he had seen in her eyes when she looked at those peppermint sticks, thinking of her children. Maybe he was just tired of being alone. The Nolan place was in worse shape than he had expected. The fence was falling down in places, and one of the barn doors hung crooked on its hinges. But the yard was swept clean, and there were flowers struggling to grow in a patch by the house, and he could see where someone had tried to keep things going despite impossible odds. 3 children tumbled out of the house when they heard the wagon. 2 boys and a girl, ranging from about 4 to 9, all skinny as rails but clean and bright-eyed. They stopped short when they saw Isaac, wary of strangers. Children, this is Mr. Zimmerman, Grace said as Isaac helped her down from the wagon. He helped me with the shopping today. Matthew, Samuel, Clara, mind your manners. The children chorused polite greetings, their eyes wide as they saw the amount of food in the wagon. Isaac watched the way the oldest boy, Matthew, positioned himself between his mother and the stranger and approved of his protectiveness. I am just going to fix your wagon wheel real quick, Isaac said easily, pulling his tool roll from Copper's saddle. Then I will be on my way. But fixing the wheel revealed that 2 other bolts were loose as well, and then he noticed the barn door, and before he knew it he was asking if she had any spare hinges. Grace protested that he had done too much already, but he waved her off and kept working. The children watched him with curious eyes, and eventually young Clara came over and sat on an overturned bucket nearby. Our papa died, she announced in the matter-of-fact way of children. A cow stepped on him. I am very sorry to hear that, Isaac said, pausing in his work. That must have been real hard. Mama cries at night when she thinks we are sleeping, Clara continued, but we try to be good so she does not worry. Isaac's throat felt tight. I bet you are a real good helper to your mama. I can gather eggs and feed the chickens, Clara said proudly. and Matthew can almost plow a straight line, and Samuel is learning to milk the cow. Children doing adult work because there was no one else to do it. Isaac knew that story well enough. He had been 9 when his own father died, and he had gone to work on a neighboring ranch to help support his mother and sisters. It had been a hard life, but it had made him who he was. Grace called the children in to help put away the groceries, and their excited chatter when they saw the bounty made Isaac smile, even as his heart ached. He could hear Grace's voice through the open door, gentle but firm, telling them to put things away properly and no, they could not have peppermints before supper. He had the barn door fixed and was checking the fence line when Grace came back out, wiping her hands on her apron. The sun was getting low in the sky, painting everything gold and orange. "Mr. Zimmerman, I cannot thank you enough," she started, but he held up a hand. "You already thanked me by helping me shop," he said. "Besides, I like keeping my hands busy. There are a few more sections of fence that could use some attention, if you have any spare wood and nails. Nothing urgent, but when you get a chance." Grace looked at him for a long moment. "You are not really on your way somewhere right now, are you? You have somewhere you need to be." Caught, Isaac had the grace to look sheepish. "I work as foreman on the Morrison Ranch about 15 miles north of here. I was supposed to be back tomorrow, but they can spare me another day or so. The boss, Clay Morrison, he is a good man. He will understand." "I cannot ask you to risk your job for us," Grace said firmly. "You are not asking. I am offering." Isaac met her eyes steadily. "Mrs. Nolan, I know what it is like to watch your mama work herself to the bone trying to hold things together. I know what it is like to go to bed hungry and pretend you are not. If I can help a little, I would like to." Grace felt tears threatening again and blinked them back furiously. She had been so alone, carrying everything by herself for so long. "I have a little money set aside," she said quietly. "I could pay you." "No, madam," Isaac said gently. "What I will accept is a place to roll out my bedroll for the night, and maybe breakfast in the morning if it is not too much trouble. Then I will head back to Morrison's place, and you can rest easy knowing your wagon and barn are in working order." It was not proper, a strange man staying on her property overnight, but Grace was too tired to care about propriety. "The barn is dry," she said, "and breakfast is the least I can do." Supper that night was simple but good. Grace made biscuits from the fresh flour and heated up beans with some of the bacon, and the children ate like they had not seen food in days, which maybe they had not like this. Isaac sat at the worn table and told stories about cattle drives and ornery horses, and made the children laugh with his descriptions of the cowboys he worked with. He saw Grace smile, really smile, for the first time, and thought it was like watching the sun come out. After supper, he excused himself to the barn while Grace put the children to bed. He made himself a comfortable spot in the hay and lay listening to the sounds of the ranch settling for the night. Copper nickered softly from the stall where he had bedded her down next to Grace's old draft horse. The chickens were roosting. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. He should leave at first light, get back to Morrison's, and forget about this place. But he knew he would not. Something had shifted in his chest today, some long dormant hope stirring to life. He had spent 10 years working other people's ranches, saving his money, never quite finding a reason to put down roots. Now, lying in this broken-down barn on a failing ranch, he felt more at home than he had in years. Grace stood in the doorway of her children's room, watching them sleep. Their bellies were full tonight, really full, and they had each gotten a peppermint after supper. Clara had fallen asleep with hers still in her mouth until Grace gently removed it. She thought about the tall cowboy in her barn, the kindness in his eyes, the way he had given her help without making her feel small for needing it. She had not felt anything but exhaustion and fear for so long that she almost did not recognize the small flutter in her chest. It was not love, not yet, but it was the first fragile shoot of hope breaking through frozen ground. Morning came cool and clear, and Isaac was already up and working when Grace came out to do the milking. He had straightened the entire barn, organized the tools that were scattered about, and was currently reinforcing one of the stall doors. "You do not have to do that," Grace said, but there was no heat in it. She was beginning to understand that Isaac Zimmerman was the kind of man who could not see work that needed doing without doing it. "Almost done," he said cheerfully. "Then I will get out of your hair." Breakfast was eggs from the chickens and more biscuits with jam that Grace had put up last summer when the world still made sense. The children were quieter this morning, as if they understood that the nice cowboy would be leaving and might not come back. Matthew in particular kept watching Isaac with an expression too old for his 9 years. "Mr. Zimmerman," Matthew said suddenly, "do you know how to fix a plow? Ours broke last week and I have been trying, but I cannot figure it out." Isaac saw Grace open her mouth to tell Matthew not to bother their guest, and he quickly said, "I know a bit about plows. Why don't you show me after breakfast?" The plow was indeed broken, the blade cracked and the harness rotted through in places. Isaac examined it carefully while Matthew hovered anxiously nearby. It was fixable, but it needed parts they did not have and work that would take time. "Mr. Zimmerman," Grace said quietly, coming up beside them, "please do not feel obligated. You have done so much already." Isaac looked at the broken plow, at the fields that needed planting, at the woman trying to hold everything together with sheer will, at the children who needed so much more than she could give them alone. He made a decision that would change everything. "Mrs. Nolan, I have a proposition for you," he said. "I have been saving money for near about 10 years now, working toward buying my own place someday. I am a good foreman and I know ranching inside and out. You have land and a house, but not enough hands to work it. What if I helped you get this place running again?" Grace stared at him. "I could not possibly pay you what a foreman is worth." "I am not talking about wages," Isaac said carefully. "I am talking about a partnership of sorts. I help you get the ranch profitable again and I get a share of the proceeds. Eventually, if things work out, maybe I could buy in as a partner proper. All legal and above board, of course." It was a crazy idea. She barely knew this man. But Grace looked around at the ranch that was slipping through her fingers despite everything she did, and thought about her children's futures and heard herself say, "I would need to think about it." "Of course," Isaac said. "I will head back to Morrison's place today, give my notice proper and settle my affairs. That will give you time to decide. If you want my help, I can be back in a week. If you decide against it, I will understand and wish you all the best." He left within the hour, but not before helping Matthew figure out a temporary fix for the plow and showing Samuel the right way to check the cow for injuries. He tipped his hat to Grace, and their eyes met and held for a moment longer than necessary. "I hope you will consider it, Mrs. Nolan," he said quietly. "I think we could do good things here working together." "I will think on it," Grace promised, and watched him ride away on Copper with her heart beating strangely fast. The week that followed was the longest of Grace's life. She lay awake at night weighing the risks and possibilities. She could not run this ranch alone, that much was clear. She had tried and was failing despite her best efforts. But inviting a stranger to live and work here, to become her partner, that was either the smartest decision she could make or the most foolish. She asked around town about Isaac Zimmerman and learned that he had worked for the Morrison Ranch for 6 years and was well respected. Clay Morrison himself, when she nervously approached him, spoke highly of Isaac's character and skill. "He gave notice 3 days ago," Clay told her, his weathered face kind. Said he had an opportunity to work his own place. I hate to lose him, but I understand the dream. If Isaac says he will do something, Mrs. Nolan, you can count on it being done and done right. That recommendation, from a man known for his integrity, decided her. When Isaac rode back up to her ranch exactly 7 days after he left, Grace was waiting on the porch. "I accept your proposition," she said before he could even dismount, "on the condition that we draw up a proper contract spelling everything out clear." Isaac's face broke into a smile that made him look younger and lit up his eyes. "I already had one drawn up by a lawyer in Holbrook," he said, pulling papers from his saddlebag. "I figured we should do this proper." They sat at her kitchen table and went through the contract line by line. Isaac would provide labor and expertise in exchange for room and board, and 25% of the ranch's profits. After 2 years, he would have the option to buy in as a half-partner if both parties agreed. All finances would be kept in careful record. Either party could end the arrangement with 30 days' notice. "This seems more than fair," Grace said, reading through it a second time. "More than fair to me, actually. You should get more than 25% for the work you will be putting in." 25% of a successful ranch is better than 100% of nothing, Isaac said practically. "Besides, this is your land, your home. I am just helping get it back on its feet." They both signed, and Grace felt the weight on her shoulders shift slightly. Not gone, but shared now. She was not alone anymore. Isaac moved into the barn, fixing up the tack room into livable quarters despite Grace's protests that he should take the spare room in the house. But propriety still mattered, especially in a small town, and an unmarried man living in the house with a widow would start tongues wagging. "The barn suits me fine," Isaac assured her. "I have lived in worse places, believe me. Besides, I am close to the animals this way if anything goes wrong at night." He threw himself into work with a dedication that amazed Grace. He repaired fences and buildings, got the fields ready for planting, and culled the cattle herd down to the healthiest animals. He traded work with neighbors to get equipment they needed and brought in a good horse trader to look at their stock. Slowly, painfully slowly, the ranch began to stabilize. The children took to Isaac like ducks to water. Matthew followed him around constantly, soaking up everything he could teach. Samuel's stutter, which had gotten worse after his father died, eased when he talked to Isaac about the animals. And little Clara declared that Isaac was the best cowboy in the whole world and regularly brought him wilting bouquets of wildflowers. Grace found herself watching Isaac more than she should. The way he was patient with the children even when he was clearly exhausted. The way he always made sure she ate enough at meals. The way he sat on the porch after supper sometimes, playing the harmonica he carried in his pocket, filling the evening air with sweet, sad songs. She had loved Thomas, or at least she thought she had. But theirs had been a practical match, 2 young people who needed what the other could provide. They had been partners, but never really friends. What she was beginning to feel for Isaac was different, deeper, colored by real knowledge of who he was. 2 months after Isaac arrived, a man from the bank came out to the ranch. Grace felt her stomach drop when she saw him riding up. She had missed another mortgage payment, too busy trying to keep everyone fed to scrape together the money. "Mrs. Nolan," the banker said, his face professionally sympathetic, "I am afraid I must inform you that the bank is prepared to foreclose on this property. You are 3 months behind on payments now." Isaac came out of the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. He sized up the situation immediately and moved to stand beside Grace. "How much does she owe?" he asked directly. The banker named a sum that made Grace want to cry. She would never have that much money, not in time. "I can cover it," Isaac said calmly, "plus the next 3 months in advance, but I want the interest rate reduced. Mrs. Nolan has been through enough without being bled dry by excessive interest." The banker sputtered, but Isaac stood firm, and eventually they negotiated new terms. Isaac went into the barn and came back with a leather pouch that clinked with coins. Grace watched in shock as he counted out the money, her entire body numb. After the banker left, clutching his payment and new contract, Grace turned to Isaac with tears streaming down her face. "Why would you do that? That was your savings, your dream." "My dream is not going anywhere," Isaac said gently. "And this ranch, your home, it is worth saving." "We are partners, Grace. Your problems are my problems now." It was the first time he had used her first name, and it sent a shiver through her. "I will pay you back every cent," she promised. "I know you will," he said, and the trust in his eyes made her feel like she could do anything. The seasons turned. They got the fields planted and brought in a modest but respectable harvest. The cattle herd grew stronger, and they sold some calves for a good price. Grace kept meticulous records of every penny, determined to repay Isaac and prove his faith in her was not misplaced. The ranch began to feel like a living thing again, instead of something slowly dying. Somewhere in all the hard work and shared meals and long conversations on the porch after the children were asleep, Grace fell in love. She could not pinpoint the exact moment. Maybe it was when she saw Isaac teaching Matthew to rope, his patience infinite even when the boy got frustrated. Maybe it was the night Clara had a fever and Isaac walked the floor with her for hours, singing soft songs until she finally slept. Maybe it was just the accumulation of 100 small kindnesses, the way he always made sure she had the comfortable chair, the way he brought her wildflowers sometimes, the way he looked at her like she was something precious. Isaac had been in love with Grace for months, though he tried hard to hide it. She was still grieving her husband, still finding her feet. The last thing she needed was pressure from him. So he kept his feelings locked away and tried to be content with friendship and partnership. But it was getting harder, especially when she smiled at him over morning coffee or brushed against him by accident, and he felt that touch all the way to his bones. They were mending fence together on an October afternoon when everything changed. Grace had insisted on helping despite Isaac's protests that he could handle it. They worked in comfortable silence, the kind that only came from people who knew each other well. The Arizona sun was warm but not punishing, and the sky was that particular shade of blue that hurt to look at. "Isaac," Grace said suddenly, "can I ask you something personal?" "Of course," he said, focusing on the wire he was stringing. "Why have you never married? A good man like you, I would have thought someone would have snapped you up years ago." Isaac was quiet for a long moment. "I guess I never found the right person," he said finally. "I saw too many marriages that were just conveniences, people settling for what was available instead of waiting for something real. I did not want that. I wanted what my parents had before my father died. They used to look at each other like the sun rose and set in each other's eyes. I figured if I could not have that, I would rather be alone." Grace felt her heart pounding. "And now," he stopped working and looked at her directly, "now I have found someone I could feel that way about, but I do not know if she could ever feel the same about me." The words hung between them like a held breath. Grace set down her tools with shaking hands. "Isaac, I need to tell you something. I cared about Thomas, but I did not love him the way a wife should love a husband. We were partners in building a life, but we were never partners in our hearts. These past months with you, I have felt things I did not even know were possible. I wake up looking forward to seeing you. I go to bed thinking about something funny you said. When you smile at me, I feel it in my whole body." Isaac crossed the distance between them in 2 strides. "Grace, I have been in love with you since the day I saw you crying in that market. Every day since has just made it stronger. I did not say anything because I did not want to push you, did not want to take advantage of your situation. But if there is any chance you could feel the same, I love you, Grace interrupted, the words tumbling out in a rush. I love you so much it frightens me sometimes. You have given me hope when I had none. You have made my children laugh again. You have made me remember what it feels like to be happy. I love you, Isaac Zimmerman. He kissed her then, soft and sweet at first, then deeper as she wrapped her arms around his neck and pressed closer. It felt like coming home, like every missing piece clicking into place. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "I know it is fast and people will talk, but I do not care. I want to be your husband, a father to your children, a true partner in every way. Marry me, Grace." "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, absolutely yes." They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Holbrook. Grace wore a new dress that Isaac had insisted on buying, pale blue calico with lace at the collar. Matthew stood as best man, trying hard to look grown up. Clara and Samuel stood with their mother, beaming with excitement at the idea of Isaac officially becoming their father. The townspeople who had watched Grace struggle for so long came to the wedding and brought food and gifts. Clay Morrison came and clapped Isaac on the shoulder and told him he had always known he would find something better than just working for wages. The preacher, knowing their situation, kept the service short and heartfelt. When Isaac kissed his bride, the children cheered, and Grace felt joy so complete it was almost painful. This was what love was supposed to feel like. This was what family was supposed to be. The wedding night was gentle and sweet. Isaac had made up the spare room as their bedroom, carrying Grace over the threshold while the children giggled and clapped. Later, alone with his wife for the first time, he took his time showing her what love could be, patient and tender, making sure she knew how cherished she was. Life on the ranch took on a new rhythm. Isaac was not just the hired help anymore, but the man of the house, Grace's husband, the children's new father. He took to the role like he was born to it, firm but fair with discipline, generous with affection, always making time for each child's individual needs. Matthew, who had been trying so hard to be the man of the family at 9 years old, finally relaxed and allowed himself to be a boy again. He and Isaac went on long rides together, checking fences and cattle. And in those quiet hours, Matthew talked about his father, about how scared he had been when Thomas died, about how grateful he was that Isaac had come into their lives. Samuel's stutter disappeared almost completely. He had a gift with animals that Isaac nurtured, teaching him everything he knew about horses and cattle. By the time Samuel was 8, he could gentle the wildest horse with patience and soft words. Clara followed Grace and Isaac both around like a devoted puppy, soaking up the affection and security she had been too young to remember from before her father died. She was a bright child with her mother's quick mind and her new father's kind heart. The ranch thrived under Isaac's management and Grace's careful financial oversight. That first year of marriage, they paid off the back mortgage completely and started actually making a profit. Isaac bought into the ranch as a full partner as the contract allowed, and they had the papers redrawn to reflect that this was now their land together. The Zimmerman Ranch. Grace discovered she was pregnant in the spring of 1884. She had worried that maybe she could not have more children. It had been so long. But when the doctor confirmed what she suspected, she nearly floated home to tell Isaac the news. He had been working on repairing the chicken coop when she found him. "Isaac," she called out, unable to keep the excitement from her voice. He turned, saw her expression, and his face lit up. "Tell me." "We are going to have a baby," she said, and laughed as he picked her up and spun her around, mindful of her condition even in his joy. The children were thrilled at the prospect of a new brother or sister. They argued constantly about which it should be and what they should name it. Isaac rubbed Grace's feet when they swelled and made sure she did not overwork herself, taking on extra chores without complaint. He talked to her belly at night, telling their unborn child stories about all the people and animals waiting to meet them. Daniel Isaac Zimmerman was born on a cold January morning in 1885. He came into the world screaming his displeasure at the temperature change, with a shock of dark hair in his father's eyes. Isaac cried when the midwife placed his son in his arms, overcome with the reality of holding his own child. Matthew, Samuel, and Clara took to their baby brother with enthusiasm, though Clara was slightly disappointed it was not a girl. But baby Daniel was so sweet and perfect that she forgave him for his gender and appointed herself his primary guardian and protector. Life settled into a beautiful pattern. The ranch continued to prosper. They added more cattle, bought the neighboring property when old Mr. Hastings decided to retire and move to California to live with his daughter. Isaac proved to have a good head for business as well as ranching, and Grace's organizational skills meant they always knew exactly where they stood financially. More children came. Emma Grace Zimmerman arrived 2 years after Daniel, a tiny thing with her mother's auburn hair and a will of iron. Then, 3 years later, twin boys that they named Joseph and Jacob, who caused twice the trouble of any single child but brought twice the joy. Isaac built onto the house as the family grew, adding rooms and a bigger kitchen and a wide porch that wrapped around 2 sides. Grace planted trees and gardens, making the rough ranch house into a real home. The barn was rebuilt properly, large enough to house all their animals and equipment with room to spare. Matthew grew into a fine young man, steady and reliable. At 18, he took over managing much of the day-to-day ranch work, freeing Isaac to focus on the business side and expansion. Samuel became known throughout the territory for his skill with horses, and people came from miles around for him to train their animals. Clara blossomed into a beautiful young woman with her mother's brains and her father's heart, becoming the teacher at the small school they built on the edge of their property for the ranch families and neighbors. Through it all, Isaac and Grace's love only grew deeper. They still made time for each other, despite the chaos of raising 6 children and running a large ranch. Sunday afternoons were theirs alone, spent riding out to their favorite spot by the creek where Isaac had first proposed marriage, talking about everything and nothing, stealing kisses like newlyweds. "You ever regret it?" Grace asked one such afternoon, lying in the grass beside her husband and watching clouds drift across the endless blue sky. They were both 40 now, weathered by sun and work but still strong. "Walking away from your plans to help me that day." Isaac turned his head to look at her, this woman who had become his whole world. "Not for one single second. You and the children, this life we built together, this is better than any dream I had alone. You gave me purpose, Grace. You gave me a family. You gave me everything that matters." Grace rolled over and kissed him, soft and lingering. "You gave me hope when I had none. You saved us, Isaac. You and your kind heart that could not walk past a woman crying in a market." "We saved each other," Isaac said firmly, "and we built something beautiful together." Years continued to pass, marked by the ordinary miracles of family life. Matthew married a sweet girl from Holbrook named Elizabeth and built a house on the northern section of the ranch. Samuel took over the horse training operation completely, expanding it into a thriving business. Clara married a lawyer from Prescott and moved away, though she came home often with her growing family. Daniel, Emma, Joseph, and Jacob grew strong and capable, each finding their own path, but all rooted in the values their parents had instilled. The ranch supported them all, a legacy built from nothing but determination and love. Isaac and Grace grew old together, their hair turning silver, their faces creasing with the lines of decades of laughter. But they still held hands when they walked, still stole kisses in the kitchen when they thought no one was looking, still looked at each other like the sun rose and set in each other's eyes. On their 30th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Children and grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren filled the house and yard with noise and joy. Isaac stood on the porch watching the chaos and felt Grace slip her hand into his. "Look at what we built," she said softly, gesturing at the thriving ranch, the happy family, the life they had created from the ashes of her darkest moment. "Look at what you built," Isaac corrected gently. "You had the courage to accept help when you needed it. You had the strength to keep fighting when everything seemed hopeless. You had the wisdom to take a chance on a stranger with kind eyes. I just helped. We built it together," Grace said firmly, the same argument they had been having for 3 decades. "Everything good in my life came from that day you saw me crying in the market." Isaac pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "Everything good in my life came from you saying yes, to my help, to my partnership, to my proposal. You took a drifter with nothing but some saved money and a willingness to work, and made him into a husband, a father, a man with roots and purpose." They stood together in the golden afternoon light, watching their legacy run and play and argue and laugh around them. 6 children, 14 grandchildren so far, and a ranch that spanned thousands of acres. From nothing but tears and hope, they had built an empire of love. When Grace passed away at the age of 72, surrounded by family, her hand clasped in Isaac's, she went peacefully with a smile on her face. Isaac held her and whispered all the things he had told her 1,000 times before, about how much he loved her, about how she was the best thing that ever happened to him, about how he would see her again. He followed her 2 years later, his heart simply giving out one morning while he sat on the porch watching the sunrise. They found him peaceful, a slight smile on his weathered face, as if he was looking forward to what came next. They buried them together on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a headstone that read, "Isaac and Grace Zimmerman, who built something beautiful together." The whole town came to the funeral, and people told stories about the cowboy who had stopped to help a crying woman at the market, and the widow who had been brave enough to accept that help. Matthew, now 55 and silver-haired himself, stood with his siblings and looked out at the ranch spread below them. "They really did build something beautiful," he said quietly. "They built us," Clara said, wiping tears from her eyes. "They built this family, this legacy of kindness and hard work and love. That is what they gave us." The ranch continued through the generations, always in the Zimmerman family, always run with the same values Isaac and Grace had instilled. The story of how it started, with a cowboy and a widow and groceries bought with kindness, became family legend, told and retold to teach children about compassion and courage, and the power of love to transform lives. In the family Bible, preserved carefully through the years, was pressed a single wilted flower. The first one little Clara had picked for Isaac, the summer he came into their lives and changed everything. Next to it, in Grace's careful handwriting, were the words, "The day Hope came home." Because that was what Isaac had given her that day in the market when he saw her crying and chose to help. Not just groceries, though those had been desperately needed. Not just work and partnership, though those had saved the ranch. He had given her hope when she had none, and from that tiny seed, watered by love and hard work and faith in each other, had grown something magnificent, a family, a legacy. A love story that would be told for generations, about the cowboy who stopped for a crying woman and the widow brave enough to let herself hope again. About partnership that became friendship, that became love, that became everything. About two people who found each other in the midst of hardship and built something beautiful together. One fence post, one sunrise, one kiss, one day at a time. And if sometimes the wind that blew across the Arizona hills sounded like harmonica music, well, that was just Isaac still serenading his beloved Grace. Some loves are too strong to be contained by something as small as death. Some loves echo through the years, a testament to what humans can build when they choose kindness, when they choose courage, when they choose each other. The ranch stood as their monument, acres of carefully tended land, filled with the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren of that first union. Every building, every fence, every tree had a story. But the best story, the one that mattered most, was simple. A cowboy saw a woman crying at the market. He bought her groceries and gave her hope. She gave him a home and a purpose. Together, they gave each other everything that mattered. And they lived, truly lived, every day they had together, building something that would last long after they were gone. Love, after all, is the only thing we build that really lasts. And Isaac and Grace Zimmerman built love in abundance enough to fill a ranch, a family, a lifetime, and beyond. Their story ended not with death but with continuation, with children who knew how to love because they had been loved, who knew how to work because they had seen honest work, who knew how to hope because hope had saved their family once upon a time in a market in Holbrook, Arizona, in 1882. And that, in the end, is the best kind of legacy. Not land or money or possessions, but love that multiplies through generations, teaching each new child the same lessons. Be kind. Be brave. Help when you can. Accept help when you need it. Choose love, even when it is scary, even when it is hard, even when it seems impossible. Choose love and build something beautiful.